The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at www.mtsu.edu/CEM.
Welcome to Middle Tennessee State University in the Center for Educational Media and Professional Development. We're here today with our ELL Collaborative Summer Academy, and we welcome everyone here on site, and we welcome everyone online who are viewing virtually. We are so happy to be back today. It is our first event on site in a couple of years. We're thrilled to see everyone here today and to have everyone join us online. I want you to know that today, for the ELL Collaborative, we have people from 80 school districts in Tennessee joining us, either here in the room or virtually. And we also have a group from Tennessee Department of Education online today. We have a quite nice group from Tennessee Department of Corrections online watching what we do today. Tennessee Department of Child Services. We have people joining us from 7 states. And we want to give a special greeting to the viewer from Osaka, Japan, who is with us today. But I want to give the most special greetings to the teachers of Tennessee, because we have teachers as far away as Johnson City and Shelby County, and as far away as Polk County past Chattanooga up to Dyersburg. So we have a beautiful representation of the educators in Tennessee. Welcome, everybody. This is the ELL Collaborative. It is the Summer Academy. We formed this initiative in 2017, and we formed it following the model that we believe there are excellent practitioners with good practices who can share those practices with other educators. That is the simple basis of the model of the ELL Collaborative, and that's what we're doing today. We try to have topics that are requested by you, and we're going to ask you to give feedback today. There will be a QR code available to you. We will ask for ideas about, do you prefer hybrid or virtual or on-site, and what topics would you like to see in future sessions? And we'll give you directions on that QR code later today. To view any of our sessions, you can go to our website, mtsu.edu/CEM. And that takes you straight to our website where you can view these sessions and our past sessions. Today we have 4 plenary sessions on topics that have been suggested by educators. I think you will leave here feeling more informed. I hope you leave here today feeling energized to start the school year, because that is one of our purposes, for you to take something from what we do and apply it in your classroom. So, are there any questions before we get started today? Any questions? And again, I'm thrilled to know we've got teachers from 80 school districts in Tennessee with us today. So we welcome everyone. So with that, I would like to introduce our faculty liaison, Dr. Jana McLean. Dr. McLean, would you come up here? Dr. McLean is a recent She's a recent teacher of English learners, and she's a new faculty member here in the College of Education at MTSU. And so she's working as a liaison here with the ELL Collaborative here. And I'm so glad you're here with us now, Dr. McLean.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here, and I was so happy to see so many familiar faces. I worked as an EL specialist in Murfreesboro City Schools for many years, and so it's great to see all of you people who I already know and many who I can't wait to get to know better. Look forward to learning together today.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right. So let's go ahead and we will get started with our first session. I'd like to introduce Dr. Chloe Walters. Dr. Walters presented in one of our early ELL collaborative sessions here. And so she is with us today, and she will be presenting. I'll let her introduce her topic. I'll let her introduce herself, but she's experienced in schools, and now she's working outside of schools recently in a new role. So Dr. Walters, thank you for being with us today.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Before we get started, I would like to thank Dr. Clark, Jana, and Jenny for all of the work that they did with this. If we could just give them a quick, golf clap, it'd be great. And then I also have to thank John, Steve, Jeff, and the amazing team here at MTSU for making this all live and available to us and letting you hear me and hear the other wonderful presenters. So let's give them a hand too, because no one ever thanks the sound guys. My name is Chloe, and I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about adult learning theory. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you have experience with adult learning theory or have heard of it before? You might have also heard of it through the term andragogy. Yes, my two people that raised their hands, Air 5, I love it. If you have questions, right here, okay? They got you, they totally got you. So I'm gonna be talking about adult learning theory and the 6 main principles that guide that theory, but how we as educators can use it to build relationships among our staff that help our students and help our colleagues become more informed in terms of teaching and advocating for our diverse learners. Okay, so I love content and language objectives, and a good way that I get teacher buy-in in my school is I show that they all come together to make our success criteria, or the main objective of the day. So all of you, by the end of today, should be able to demonstrate a basic understanding of andragogic principles. Oh boy. Exciting. Apply your understanding of the principles of andragogy to both case studies and personal experiences that you've had. Don't read case studies and be like, oh boy, she's going to make us read a case study. The little task cards in your packet, those are your case studies for today. We're going to be able to engage with visual and auditory presentation through active listening and group discussion. We're going to provide feedback to each other and to me through informal writing and group discussion. And then your success criteria, putting those all together, we can explore and apply the principles of adult learning to our own professional roles through active engaged listening, small and large group discussion, and informal writing. Thumbs up if that sounds like a great way to start your Thursday in the middle of summer. Okay, this is our agenda. I'm a huge agenda checklist person, so if anybody wants to write this down just so you know where we're going, that's totally cool. A quick introduction, we're gonna go over adult learning theory and those 6 principles. Then we're gonna talk about how it applies to our roles and then apply it to some tasks where we practice together. Then we'll have closure, a little feedback, and if we get done early, the time is yours to either prepare for the next session or discuss what we have talked about today. Okay, our guiding questions. Those are also on your sheets as well. How can I use specific principles of adult learning to establish and strengthen collaborative professional relationships with my colleagues? And then how can increased understanding of adult learning theory positively impact student learning in my school? We are here because of our students, obviously. So we need to bring this all back to the students by the end of today, and please try to keep them in mind as you go through. Okay, little bit about me. I am a program specialist at a nonprofit called the Diverse Learners Cooperative. I oversee the specialist coaching and professional development for multilingual learners in that organization in the Nashville offices. There are Nashville and Memphis offices. I used to work in Rutherford County at Rocky Fork Middle School. I absolutely loved it. It's a wonderful, wonderful place, and I see some former colleagues here. It's so nice to see some familiar faces. I got my TESOL master's in New York before moving to Nashville, and then I got my EDD in Learning Organizations and Strategic Change at Lipscomb last year. I've been a curriculum lead, a curriculum contributor, a club sponsor. Any musical theater people in here? Any people do the musical? Yeah, I know you do, Andrew. As well as a co-teacher. And that's where I really started to get into adult learning theory as I collaborated much more actively with my colleagues. Okay, so we all are well versed in pedagogy by this point. If you're in this room, you've heard that word probably 5,000 times. So I'm going to introduce you to andragogy today if you haven't already heard of it. Andragogy is to adult learning as pedagogy is to K-12 learning. So for a long time, pedagogy was the main thing that was focused on. And then starting with early research in about the 1970s, a man named Malcolm Knowles started, oh, I'm seeing thumbs up. Nobody fangirls over Malcolm Knowles except me usually, so I'm really excited to see this. He started studying how adults respond better if they're not treated like children. Imagine that, right? How wonderful. So a general overview, adults come to learning with a wealth of knowledge already. It might not be knowledge in the specific topic that they're learning, but they have a whole lifetime of experiences that is double, triple, quadruple what a K-12 student has in their life experiences. Adults, shockingly enough, aren't used to taking the lead in their learning. Kids, you'll give them an assignment and they're like, all right, let's do it, hopefully. Sometimes a few will hang back, but once they get into it, they're usually fine. Sometimes they're so fine that they'll go off completely in the wrong direction and you have to corral them back. Whereas adult learners typically like to have some guidelines and some reminders of where they're going, why they're going in that direction, am I going in this direction the right way? Adults need time to reflect and internalize. They have a much greater capacity for metacognition because we have been with our own brains for a lot longer than kids, so we have started to learn how we operate and then we apply that to our learning. Adults have preconceived notions about all things, not just learning, right? So adults, because of their experiences, can't help but bring these preconceived notions and biases and ideas into their learning, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we acknowledge it and we embrace it and look into those experiences that cause those notions, we can actually make much more meaningful connections with our learning. And then finally, adults are much more afraid to fail than students. You don't have to raise your hand, but I have a feeling that if I were to say, how many of you are afraid of failure or don't like to fail or would rather do absolutely anything than fail at a project, a lot of hands would be up in this room. Adults take failure a lot harder. They view it as a personal fault when it has nothing to do with who they are or what they believe in. And adults have a lot more affective filters. How many of you have heard the term affective filter before? Great, okay, we all know that one in this room. So adults have a lot more affective filters getting in the way of courage to learn. So this is just kind of an overview. These aren't the 6 principles, but this is just a general idea of where adults are when they come to learning. And we'll get into why it's important to remember this in a little bit. So the 6 principles of andragogy. If you would like to take notes on this, you can refer to the first page of your packets, and those of you who are viewing us online, there is a document on the website that you are free to download and type in. You are by no means expected to take notes. This is just a space for those of you who like to write while there is a presenter speaking to you. Okay, so these are the 6 principles of andragogy. The adults need to know, the adults' self-concept, their prior experiences that they bring to the table, their readiness to learn the material, their orientation towards learning, which also ties into that prior experiences, and then their motivations to learn. Now, there are a couple of key descriptions that go with each of these, so I'm going to go over these verbally with you first, just so you can start thinking about how these apply to you. And then I'm going to ask if anyone wants to share any personal connections with this before we go into the next slide that does have a detailed outline of descriptions of each of these. All right, just want you to know where we're going. So when you tell an adult the what, and the why of what they're learning before they learn it, it will be much more likely to lead to a cooperative learning environment. And cooperative is a very key word there. Adults don't want typically one person to tell them what to do in the I told you so. Really, no one wants that, right? But they want to be an equal partner in their learning. They want it to be cooperative. So if the instructor or teacher, or if you are approaching an adult and you're trying to teach them something, if you go into, this is what I would like to try to do, and this is how it could maybe help us, why we need to do it, why it will help our students, it is much more likely to create a cooperative relationship as opposed to just going and saying, hey, this is what needs to be done. Are both technically correct? Yes, something does need to be done, but in terms of the delivery, opening with the what and why can really help. So that goes with the need to know. Adult learners' self-concept, when you're working with adults, this is similar to when you're working with kids. You have to consider the adult's needs. Do they need to learn this information? Yes. Why do they need to learn this information? You've explained it. What are their needs outside of this scenario? What are their learning needs? What are their needs in terms of their schedule? When do they need to get all of their solo work done during a day so that they have time and space in their mind and schedule to talk to you in the afternoon? Do they like to work on things really early in the morning before school so that they can reflect and think on it throughout the day? These are just a few examples of adults' needs. Other examples of adults' needs could get into more professional needs, different, if say a new teacher, you've been asked to mentor a new teacher and they might be struggling a little bit, what are their needs in general in terms of their functioning at work, and then also add on top of that, what are the needs in terms of the problem you're trying to solve. If these needs are overlooked, or if they're not acknowledged at all, or if they're not acknowledged correctly, this can often lead to much more opposition to learning, which starts to affect 4, 5, and 6 at the bottom of the principles, the readiness, orientation, and motivation to learn. Prior experience, again, we've kind of already talked about this, but adults bring a wide range of abilities to the table, and if those abilities aren't used and aren't tapped, that can not only create an opposition to learning, but also a total disinterest in learning. I think we've all been to a PD where we've been told how to do something that we know how to do really, really well. How many of you have been to a PD where they opened and they're like, okay, it is so important to start with a warm-up, right? Like, have you gotten that PD where you're like, yes, I agree, right? We don't ever want to do that to adults. And oftentimes the person doing it isn't trying to be rude, but as soon as that happens, there's a huge disconnect between you and your audience. How many of you are starting to think of some personal examples where these needs for you and these principles were met by someone teaching you as an adult, and then situations where they weren't met? Is anybody kind of starting to think of that? Okay, so once I get through all 6 of these, I will ask some people to share, so just be thinking about that. Orientation, motivation, and readiness to learn, they all kind of go hand in hand, which is why they are grouped together at the bottom of the list. Readiness, adults are really very good at differentiating between the information that they need and want to know and the information that is irrelevant and busy work, typically. So as a result, the teachers of adult learners need to be able to differentiate between that too, and that all goes back up to the what and why. If you can't answer the what and why about what you're teaching and how that impacts your students, then it probably doesn't need to be in the presentation whatsoever. Orientation to learning, adults will appreciate real-world scenarios and situations being brought into the material as much as possible. Students also benefit from that. Typically, the older they get, it's better to bring in more and more of these real-world applications. So adults are not going to respond well to, I always think of the tweet that goes around that says, if Sally buys 6 pancakes on the moon and then ends up with 6 red bicycles, you know, how many ping pong balls does she have, right? That's not something that we want to move towards, really with any learner, but especially with adult learners. And then the motivation for learning has to be intrinsic. Adults are not typically, I mean, I like stickers, but adults are not gonna wanna fill in their sticker chart. They're not gonna, you know, tossing candy to the crowd might be great on the first day or for the first 5 minutes, but after a while it's like we are all capable of purchasing our own candy. Motivation has to be intrinsic. So, and as a teacher of adult learners, there's someone collaborating with adults trying to teach them how to do something, it can be tricky to figure out what that intrinsic motivation is. So it's usually good to provide lots of examples of how this learning material that you're trying to communicate can benefit them professionally and personally. So today, for example, my goal is to provide you with some strategies to use in your profession that will also create better relationships among your colleagues that are outside of professional situations. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples of my experiences with this as we go through this chart. So all of the principles are here, and if you want to add a few of those notes under there, you can take a picture. And we will be doing an exit ticket, and if you want me to send you any of these materials, you can just add your email to the exit ticket and I'll send you everything I've got. So my example is called Good Professor, Bad Professor. And I don't want you to think bad as like evil, just not really privy to the way adults learn, okay? So in grad school, I had a great professor. She really prioritized our need to know on the first day. She explained what we were going to be learning in her class, why it would help us, and showed us examples of past students that it helped right off the bat. Bad professor, we get into his class and he just starts teaching, just starts. No introductions. He did say, hello, my name is Professor so-and-so, but just kind of started getting into page 1 of the syllabus, right? Doesn't really get into our need to know, our long-term goals. Self-concept, we had a lot of surveys and journals and discussions in Good Professor's class in which not only did she read our thoughts but responded to them individually to show that we were heard and to kind of get to know us and our self-concept as we approach different prompts and questions. Bad Professor's class, no opportunities for discussion, no real interest in getting to know us was shown, and there were not a lot of assignments that allowed us to demonstrate any examples of our self-concept whatsoever for him. Prior experience, Good Professor's class would always bring in what types of experiences we were doing. So we had field experience in that program, as most programs do. And so we were often asked to talk about if we had applied anything and how we had applied it from class with our students and then report back to see how it went. Those discussions were not had in Bad Professor's class at all. In fact, no discussion was had. I can remember that was the class where I would sit, open my computer, and got really good at looking like I was taking notes, but I was really working on some of my other homework assignments. Yes, I'll confess, I have done that before. And then readiness to learn, this teacher the good professor would constantly edit her syllabus. So if she discovered a news article that refuted an old material that she had posted for us, she would delete it, update the syllabus, and then tell us, hey, I found this new information that's actually better. So she showed a willingness to continue differentiating the information for us between what was relevant and necessary and what was no longer relevant, even with upcoming research that was happening as the class was being taught after the materials were prepared. Real world situations, again, she had us share our field experience. She shared her own field experience and professional experience and motivation to learn. Because she really got to know us and got a better sense of our self-concept, she was able to intrinsically motivate us because she showed us that she cared about who we were as people. And you really don't want to disappoint someone who cares about you as a person and as an educator, right? So that was kind of our intrinsic motivation. Readiness, orientation, motivation was just not ever considered, I think, by our poor, sweet, bad professor. At the end, when I was presenting my final project in his class, he said, thank you, Claire, even though my name is Chloe. So it was, just clear, like he had not gotten any type of training on adult learning. He was just told, this is what you gotta teach, here they are, kind of thing. And so we all have those good and bad professors and good and bad moments. So Looking at these 6 principles, I just want to ask a volunteer to discuss, are there any principles that really resonate with you in terms of an example where someone definitely applied that principle to your learning? Yes.
Okay, as a college professor, I have learned that adults don't care about the grade. It kind of goes back to what you said. They want the feedback. And so they want to know what they're doing right, and they want to know what they can do to improve, because I don't like to use the term what they're doing wrong, because nobody's wrong necessarily. And so I'm not sure where that goes along in there, but I have found out that if you don't give them a lot of feedback, they'll ask you a lot of questions, and so, yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. I had my first adjuncting experience this year, and yes, feedback is definitely a demand of adult learners. I think that that could go with 1, 2, or 3. Providing feedback shows that, okay, they need to know XYZ continued about this content, so I'm going to give them feedback on it. Their self-concept, they're showing me that they feel comfortable when they're being given feedback, so I'm doing that for them. And then, of course, prior experiences. I mean, when you give feedback, it usually turns into a really organic conversation of sharing experiences. Thank you. Yes?
In my work with high school kids, the orientation to learning and the need to know is absolutely critical, because if you cannot immediately connect the content of the learning with what that child is experiencing as a high schooler, as an adolescent, then it is wasted energy.
Man, we should paint that on the wall somewhere. That was fabulous. It is totally wasted energy if you are not willing to do that. There is actually a new emerging adult learning theory called odagogy. There's not a lot published about it, but I did encounter some articles about it, and they absolutely incorporate those 2 components of andragogy with some of the components of pedagogy. I'm glad you brought that up. Mm-hmm.
So when I was working on my master's here at MTSU, I had a professor who was also like my advisor, and I think what really brought me into the program and what made me want to be here on time, ready to learn, was his ability to respect me as an individual, and he respected everyone in the class as individuals. So, you know, he knew that we were also working while we were trying to learn, and he was very graceful with us. He was understanding if we had to turn things in a little late. He was understanding if it wasn't always the best work, because he knew that we were, you know, most of us were in the classroom, had our own children, you know, and we had lives outside of the program. So I think that was very attractive as a learner, and it made me want to be more successful because he had respected me as an individual, so I wanted to respect him as my professor.
Absolutely. So that ties in not only the self-concept, but also that motivation where if respect is given, you want to respect them as a professor. And respect always leads to a better learning environment. Excellent. Thank you all for your contributions. Does anyone have any examples where you can see that one or more of these needs was absolutely not met by someone who is trying to teach you something? And this doesn't just have to relate to professors either. It can be professional development. It can be even a quick meeting among colleagues.
I have another example for that.
Yes.
Veteran teachers hate when new things are introduced that they feel will not stay. They understand the what, why, and how because that's the latest whatever. They have so much prior experience as to the ins and outs of education that they get very frustrated. So I think the behoovement of a district whenever they roll out something new is that motivation to learn. They have to really explain what the personal payoff is to those veteran teachers. And oftentimes it is rehashing something the same way. And they have I'm just going to say this, that districts tend to have a one-size-fits-all for every teacher in the district instead of going, okay, my veteran teachers, what background have we already done? What do we need to use to build onto this? And what if our haven't been here for this, for what we've been building on, then they don't respect that. They don't make it more individual, I guess. So
I couldn't agree more. How many of you who consider yourselves veteran teachers have not been consulted before a major change was rolled out in your school? Yes,
If
absolutely.
you've been teaching more than 3 years.
Yes, you bring up such a good point. Veteran teachers, I mean, are the perfect example of bringing a wealth of prior experiences to the table in the field that is so often untapped. Imagine how you would feel and how much more motivated you would feel if you were part of a focus group with your principal that said, okay, they're thinking of rolling this out. I just want you to play with it for today and give you feedback. Also, I'm going to pay you to do this. You're not coming in on the summer. I'm going to pay you to do this. Yes, exactly. Anyone have any final comments, connections, good professor, bad professor examples they would like to share?
I learned overseas. I went to language school overseas and was in a group of people who were all multilingual, and we were trying to learn a pretty complex language. And the teacher would come in, and we were all adult learners, and we had our doctorates and our masters and all of that. And the teacher would come in totally violation of the prior experience or a sense of self-concept, slam her ruler on the desk in front of you and tell you how stupid you were and how idiotic you were and how you were never going to succeed. And her goal was to get some person to run out of the room crying, literally. And I've just never seen such a perfect picture of a violation of all the principles of andragogy, except in that learning environment. And so I think that sometimes we assume that these practices are kind of global, and they're not always put in place.
No, definitely not. That reminds me of my ballet teacher, right? With that determined to make somebody cry or like slamming the ruler. In her case, it was like a big cane. Yes, I'm sure we've all had experiences throughout our lives where someone came in just guns a-blazing, really, really strictly gonna provide some kind of instruction or direction to you. And it's like, I don't know really anyone who functions well in that environment or functions well for a sustainable amount of time, right? They might do okay in that one round, but if it was just continued, repeated every single day, it's really not sustainable. And it must be exhausting to be that person, slamming your ruler and scrunching your shoulders up. Nobody wants to be that. Excellent. Thank you all for your feedback and commentary. So there is a quote that I pulled from a study on andragogy and its applications to adult education in the tech field. Designing the learning plan comes from applying these principles and then putting it into place for the plan for the adults. So in this step, a plan is drawn up based on the learner's needs and aspirations. Problems to be solved should be from the learner's area of interest. Learning methods should encourage learners to achieve their intended goals. When I was asked to speak here today, I was given a variety of different topics that I could perhaps present on based on not only my expertise, but feedback from prior conferences. This topic was chosen by previous participants in this subject. So this conference is a great example of taking adult learners' needs into consideration because this topic was actually generated from feedback that it was given. That should be at the forefront of every administrator's mind when they're doing their beginning of the year PD, but it can be very difficult if it's not at the forefront of the district's mind when the district is handing down, okay, this is everything you have to cover. So think of how much better those first few days of school where you're sitting through tons of meetings, PowerPoints that legally have to be shown, sections that legally have to be read, if your motivations for learning these things were even just stated, let alone considered. If your prior experiences were not just acknowledged with a stand up if you've worked here for 10 years, but with actual cooperation and collaboration. So that's the world we're trying to move towards, and it absolutely starts with you. Okay, so we are going to start practicing this a little bit. Our second guiding question, how can an increased understanding of adult learning theory positively impact student learning in my school? That is the main reason why we're here today. We want to build our understanding of it, and then how can we use it in our school to help our students? So, an understanding of adult learning can enhance our capabilities in the following areas. I looked at what I was particularly called upon to do with adults in my school when I was teaching at Rocky Fork Middle School, and I kept coming up with subjects that fell into these three areas: professional development, instructional collaboration, and then personal learning. So in terms of professional development, often the teachers of multilingual learners, teachers of special education students, counselors, etc., are asked to give professional development sessions either throughout the year, at the beginning of the year, on different aspects of what is going to be expected of the students and teachers in terms of those students. How many of you have already been asked to give a professional development session at your admin's day? Wonderful, excellent, okay. And then how many of you are planning on perhaps pursuing your own professional development delivery, either maybe as an after-school session or in another conference? Get those hands up, people. You are the prior experience. You are the untapped wealth. Excellent, love it. If we go into professional development with all of these ideas, but maybe have never presented in front of adults before, or maybe working at a new school, or even working with a staff that you've known very well, but you haven't had to lead them in something, it can be a little bit difficult. So if you design your professional learning with the adults in mind that are going to be receiving it, not only will they connect to what you're trying to say a little bit more, but you're likely to be asked back or asked to continue this work. In terms of instructional collaboration, we often have to co-plan with teachers. We often have to co-teach, push in all different sorts of models. We have to collaborate with our special education departments, our counseling departments, our hallway grade level leads. There's tons of collaboration in an ELL teacher's job. Really, there should be tons of collaboration in all teachers' jobs. But with that collaboration, you're collaborating with adults for kids. It's very different when you're collaborating with your kids in a group or in your classrooms. That needs to be considered as well. And then teachers are responsible for their own personal learning, right? We're told how many hours we have to get. Sometimes if there's different specialties or certifications, that can add on different requirements to the types of professional development that you receive. So if you are really in tune with who you are as an adult learner and you are able to recognize those 6 principles within yourself, it will help you choose professional development offerings that actually give you something, right? It will really start to help you weed out what is not really going to be your cup of tea, what's not going to help you, and then what, okay, this is going to excite me, this is going to get the most out of me, this is going to help my students the most. So with that, I have created a couple of case studies. If you could open to the second page of your packet, you will have a task card. You are going to read the scenario on your task card. These are what the task cards look like, okay? So task 1, your principal says, hey, during our admin day, I need you to give a 30-minute PD that tells everyone everything they need to know about WIDA access, TCAP, ILPs, and just a quick, demographics of our students receiving EL services. You're on at 2:30, let's go, right? How would you handle that? Applying the principles of adult learning as a little guide. Task 2, this year, yay, you're going to be co-teaching with one of the social studies teachers. It is a pilot program, how very exciting. And so you are trying to create a linguistically rich environment that also provides access to the content for all learners. You and your new co-teacher set up a meeting at the beginning of the year. How are you going to communicate what needs to be done for your students, applying the principles of adult learning to this expert in their own field? And how are you going to learn from them? Task 3, 5 weeks into the school year, 5-week reports are coming out. All your ILPs are done, they are sent off, they are looking beautiful. You're approached by a new teacher who is frazzled. This new teacher is stressing out because they feel like they are not meeting the needs of some of the multilingual learners in their classroom, and they come to you for advice. But instead of asking specifically for what they need, they haven't given a lot of thought to it, so they say, I need you to help me, and just leave it there. How are you gonna apply the principles of adult learning to help this frazzled, stressed out teacher turn into the expert that they really are inside? And then task 4, a parent has contacted you because their student is failing a class, okay? They're failing a class, and you are particularly puzzled by this because the teacher of that class has told you multiple times throughout the year how much they love this student that is failing, okay? So upon further discovery, or further investigation, you discover that while the student loves participating in the class, loves this teacher, speaks oftentimes with a little more eloquence than their native English-speaking peers to the teacher, They are receiving assignments that are not differentiated, and they're receiving tests that are not differentiated and are not receiving extended time. So because they're ashamed and nervous about handing in an incomplete piece of work or an incorrect piece of work, they're hanging on to it and getting zeros. Okay? How many of you experienced at least one of these before? Yes, I was so excited. Really, really hoped this would apply. So these are your 4 tasks, and for those of you who are watching us live, I'm going to go on to the next page to explain the directions, but then I'll put these back up. So to our nearly 200 Zoom viewers who are watching this now virtually, it's really, really exciting that they're here. They can't split into groups, so I'm going to allow them to choose which task that they want to do, and then perhaps maybe I can post later, if you follow up with the exit ticket, what some of the interesting options were so everyone can see each other's work. Okay. On the last page of your packet, you have a graphic organizer. Again, if you just want to discuss your way through this and don't want to write things down, that's totally fine. You are adults. Take from this what you need. In your group, you are, however, going to be responsible for crafting a plan to complete and respond to your task in a way that fulfills the task requirements, but also applies the principles of adult learning to the adults that you will be interacting with in that situation. Consider how you might address each specific principle on its own before you pull them all together, and then what obstacles you can foresee getting in the way of you being able to effectively address that principle. And then in your groups, you're going to choose one, yes, spokesperson, who will eventually share as much or as little of the plan when we return to a whole group.
Like fluency and things like that. Yeah.
The learners need to know, I think from this first meeting, we both need to know and understand that our goal.
They're kind of shocked because they're in their little bubble and they don't realize the growth.
All right, so that's the what, the why? Because otherwise they won't learn.
And then to give her or him some strategies to help so it'll make it easier.
Alrighty, so thank you so much. We are going to get started with our first group. Can I have all of the spokespersons, please, spokespeople, please raise your hands so that we can see you when we come over to you. Nice, perfect. Who's the spokesperson over here? Wonderful, wonderful. Alrighty, so we are going to hand the spokesperson the microphone. Let's hear it for our first spokesperson, Miss Brittany Holloway. Thank you so much for speaking today and for writing such a beautiful plan. I'm so excited. Which task did you have?
So we had task number 4.
Task number 4, supporting the student in the class. Alrighty, so here you are. And then how did you approach this task while applying the principles of adult learning?
So we went through each of the principles of adult learning and just looked at what that means from the lens of the teacher's eyes. And so that kind of helped us to create the plan and kind of see some of the possible obstacles and concerns that we may have as we encounter each of these different principles of adult learning. So I'll kind of go through some of the things that we discussed in our group. So the learners need to know, we discussed how it could be a possible problem with us meeting with a teacher, when are we gonna meet with them, what time? That's always, I feel like, a battle because, usually ESL teachers are serving students and teachers are teaching and, all the extra things that we have on our plate. But just making sure that you set that time aside so that you're able to ask the teacher what's going on with this student. Why do we think that they're not being successful? Like providing the teacher, as the ESL teacher, providing them with support. How can I help you? What do you need support with? Can you show me what these assignments look like so we can kind of see how we can change and make this better and more supportive for the student. Then when we looked at the self concept, we just said we wanted to make sure that the teacher's aware that there are resources out there where it could provide an opportunity for the student to translate things, maybe if they don't understand it, to help them to build that background knowledge. Maybe they have a Spanish translation, an English translation. We could help them provide them with that resources or other resources that they may need. Just make sure that we're helping them, they are the content specialists, so if they're teaching science, social studies, or math, they're really familiar with their state standards, but we're really familiar with the WIDA standards. So helping them, bridge those two together is really important. And then we looked at the prior experience. What have the teachers done? What have they changed? What has been successful? What has been unsuccessful? What can we do? Are they aware that their student needs, support in understanding their academic vocabulary? What academic goals or gaps do these students have? We talked in our group, we know a lot of times these kids will struggle in math because they don't have the fluency for their multiplication facts. So making sure that we're, taking a step back and seeing how can we support that student so that we can close those gaps and continue to grow. And then we just looked at the readiness to learn. We wanted to make sure that the teacher is always reflecting on their teaching and how are they willing to make changes and adjustments to help support that student better. And we can definitely help them with that. Hopefully they're open to that. Allow the student an opportunity if they weren't successful with that. Allow them opportunities so they can reteach that lesson maybe in a small group, and that student can come back and they can retake that assessment, make those corrections to the errors that they had on that assessment to help them be more successful. And then we just talked about the orientation to learning. We wanted to make sure that we were having an opportunity for the students to turn in their materials, address that concern because the student wasn't turning in their materials, help build their confidence so that they're more willing to take those risks of turning in those materials. Talk to the teacher about what are their goals, refer to their ILPs, and just have check-ins with the teacher, have check-ins with the students and, support them that way. And then we know motivation for learning, that the teachers obviously has a relationship with this student. She's excited about the student. So we just want to make sure that they continue having those conversations, building that relationship, having empathy, supporting them in the ways that they need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Can we hear it for this group? Excellent work. I have one follow-up question to anyone in this group. Just don't answer till I give you the microphone so everyone can hear the answer. If there were other types of opposition to you having success with this plan besides time, what do you think the top source of opposition to you applying some of these principles with a colleague at equal standing would be, besides the time frame?
I think people can be defensive, maybe feel like I already tried it and I'm not the problem. So I think that could be a challenge.
Definitely. And how would you perhaps address that?
I think what we talked about was just building on their empathy with the student and just building on the relationship and the thing that they valued about the child and just kind of building on that and just kind of helping them see. We talked about teaching them about differentiating and like where the child's coming from and how there could be barriers that maybe the teacher didn't think about before.
I love that. Thank you. I'm so glad you focused on building empathy. Students can be a great commonality between two adults that otherwise maybe might not get along or want to interact very much with each other, but it is our job to support these educators because we want to support the kids. So if you've been contacted by a parent, they probably have too, so then if you become another person that's saying you are doing XYZ wrong, that cuts off that relationship. But if you build on that empathy and that love for the student, exactly as this group said, you're going to have a much more meaningful connection with this person. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it off. Oh, I'm going to this one. Wonderful. Can we have the Dr. Tennyson? Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Which task was this? Same task?
This is task two.
Task two. Co-teaching. Love it.
So I have to say that this group is elementary, so they come with love and feeling, and we are secondary, and we come from the content standard. So, but because it is a different, sorry, I just have to, so we kind of came, she's elementary, but I think we looked at this task as more of a secondary thing when you're having to go in and co-teach with that content area specialist. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to feel out what their motivation is and why they're doing this. Are they volunteering or being voluntold? So, because we know that gives you two different perspectives in the brain. And so we need to make sure that we understand them. We need to hopefully use inclusive language. This is us. What are we doing together? What are our students? How can we help them to succeed? And then we're going to have to finesse them a little bit. We're going to have to get them on the understanding of how they can support the students. And one of our motivations to learn was definitely test scores. And in high school, how many of you guys are high school teachers? Okay, in high school, there's not a lot of us. It is not every subject is tested. So there are other motivations that we have to look for. It's easy to look, especially at middle school teachers, and go, okay, this is a tested subject, everything but a few classes is tested in middle school, and go, what can we do to help them grow their scores? But in high school, that's not true. So we have to really figure out what their motivation is when we're feeling out that temperature. And then how many of you have gone to a PD and they have given you a list of all the things that you should be doing? Especially, we're really bad at this. These are all of the things that you should be doing to help your ELs in the classroom. Well, if you're a content area specialist, that's very overwhelming and it's not a good approach. So we said, what is the first thing that we can start with to help them help our students have access to their curriculum? And so what's the one thing that's the best thing to start with? Visuals, right? Yes, vocabulary is great, but if you have a kid that doesn't speak any English and has very low literacy background, a picture is worth literally 1,000 words. So we talked about how social studies teachers love PowerPoints, love their content, and really they are in there's a ton of information that they have to get across. If you've ever looked at any upper grade high school social studies curriculum, there's a ton that they have to quote unquote get through the whole year. And so one of the things we can do is, if they've already got those PowerPoints created, please send us those PowerPoints. What are some things that we can do to help modify? And then, as our elementary expert said, let's look at those essential learnings. What are the 10 things out of this PowerPoint that you're going to want them to know for the assessment? Kind of that backwards planning. And so helping them understand what is most essential and helping them understand what's the one way. So just figuring out what to begin with. Setting expectations. What are your expectations for the ELs in the classroom? And then we have to determine who's going to teach. Because if the content area teacher doesn't see us as an equal partner in that teaching, it can be very difficult for the students to see us as an equal partner. And so saying to them, hey, we want to teach too. And that's really hard sometimes. I know when people come into my classroom, I'm a control freak. I'm not going to lie to you. One time I had a student teacher, I got a little frustrated because I didn't feel like they were doing the things that I thought they needed to do. So I have to think through my mind, is this content area teacher willing to release with me? And so sometimes that release is a little bit at the beginning. I know people have done, a lot of EL teachers will go in and they'll do the bell work with the kids and say, okay, I'll do the bell work. You do attendance, I'll sit and do the bell work. And so finding that way to kind of get in there with them and make sure that we respect the fact that they see this as their classroom, and we have to help them see this as our classroom. That's where inclusive language comes from. Yes? No?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Let's hear a round of applause for that group. Wonderful. Thank you. So we have about 14 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is make sure we get to hear task 1 and task 3. And then if we have extra time, I will circle back to the doubles of those groups. So task 3, my fearless leaders who sat nearest to the front, let's give an extra loud round of applause for them. This is just really special to me. Thank you so much. So task 3 is this group, and that is the advising the frazzled colleague.
Well, we know that she already has motivation. She came to us. She had a desire to learn. So what we wanted to do was figure out what her prior experiences were. Has she had any prior experience with differentiating and accommodating students of any nature whatsoever that we could draw on? Whether she herself had learned another language and so had experience with having to do that, or had been even outside the country and experienced cultural interactions. And then we wanted to focus on giving her not only just initial things that she can build on, use right away, translation, websites to help her learn to differentiate, but to build a pathway of support to where we could give her one strategy, let her work on it, maybe even co-teach with her or model teach for her, let her work on that, and then give her the next strategy and go from there.
Outstanding. I'm going to point this way with me. Yes, let's hear a round of applause for that. I specifically love what you said about build a pathway for support, because you don't want to just help this teacher right now. You want her to continue to be empowered and take charge of her own learning, and I absolutely love that. I also love that your group approached the prior experiences with multilingual learners and multilingual speakers, both in and out of the classroom, asking questions about travel and other things like that. Thank you so much. And then, who is just dying to speak for task one? Which spokesperson is gonna fight it out? Oh, wonderful, thank you so much. Task one, the full staff PD in 30 minutes, everything you need to know about WIDA Access and the students. What do you got?
All right, so for the why, we put that you will have an EL student in your classroom, most likely. They can be transitional, direct serve, but you will have a student that's EL, so this will benefit you. We also talked about that the funding, that this counts up to 5 times for a student for TCAP, like we were talking about with the testing. We want to bring that in as well. And so for the how, we talked about that this will be your accommodations, that you have the ILPs, you have the IEPs, you're just bringing it back around. So then we talked about, for learners' prior experience, the population growth, where we've been, where we're going. I'm sure everybody has seen exponential growth with your ELs in whatever school system that you're in. And then we talked about that you can use strategies for every student. Your special needs, your ELs, your gen ed. These strategies are not just for if you have an ESL student. They're going to benefit you for your whole class. Then we talked about, for motivation to learn, your student growth, your data, and again, that you can apply those strategies wherever, in whatever classroom, whatever grade level you're in, you can apply these to your students.
Outstanding, thank you so much. I love that you brought up that these strategies and this information that you're presenting helps every single student in the school and in the classroom. That's how I used to pitch the SIOP model. Instead of going like, here's 9 things that are actually 34 sub things for you to do, it would be, these are strategies that you're already doing, or these are strategies that you can enhance just a little bit more that will help every student and help you be a better teacher. Excellent work, thank you. The fastest yet most eloquent plan that we have heard today. Here we go. Which task were you again?
Task 2, the co-teaching.
Co-teaching, great.
This group, y'all went in depth. That secondary thinking, thank you so much for all those details. We just thought relationships are most important. If you cannot build those relationships, you can't even talk about the content. You can't talk about the standards. So building trust, going to coffee, coming over for dinner, hanging out.
The first person to mention food and drink. Yes, the first person. Food and drinks are very motivating for adults. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Picking up their kids after school.
Excellent.
Like picking up their kids after school. I don't know. Do what you can to build relationships. So that was our co-teaching moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. If this group would like to go, I can make my closure so fast. We all know how to speed up a closure before the bell rings, don't we? Would you like to go? Quick as that? Yes, perfect. Thank you.
We were group 1, which was the PD PowerPoint. One thing that we talked about was really involving the teachers in the presentation. So if that's giving them very specific best practices that they really need or are already putting in place, and then asking them if they've ever gone abroad, like this group mentioned, if they've ever felt out of place, if they've ever had a student that they struggled to teach, something like that. So bringing in their perspective a little bit more.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing and for really getting into work with some of these tasks. I really appreciate the time and attention you gave each one and the incredible work you were able to come up with in just 15 minutes, right? I gave you 15 minutes to tackle those problems with principles that you just went over 15 minutes ago. Think of what you could do if you continue to reflect on these principles and apply them to other tasks. It would be absolutely phenomenal. And I wish we could all return next year and share how you apply these principles, but we'll just have to wonder. Thank you so much again. Okay, so our success criteria was I can explore and apply the principles of adult learning to my professional role through active, engaged listening, small and whole group discussion, and informal writing. You handled your tasks absolutely beautifully. I really appreciate your time and attention and your active participation both through listening and speaking today. Truly fabulous work. But as adults, you obviously need a little bit of time to reflect on your own learning. So for the last 7 minutes, I'm going to hand out these exit tickets, and this time will be yours. I will be circulating if you have any questions. The way these exit tickets work is if you are able to scan the QR code on them, please do, and pass the paper to the person next to you. If you are not able to scan the QR code, hang on to your paper. The questions are also on there, and I can collect them at the end. This is my information if you would like to follow up with me on anything today, or as our wonderful task presenter said, maybe get coffee and discuss some of these things. That would be fabulous. And I just really hope you enjoy the day. And I can't end today without saying that Tennessee educators are some of the best educators that I've ever experienced. No matter what anybody says, no matter how anybody feels about you ignore them, right? You are here, you are working on your summer, you are devoted to your kids, and you are brilliant experts. So thank you for sharing your precious time with me today. And yeah, don't believe anything different. Thank you.